These years were a period of immense growth and development for our church. In faith, the congregation responded to the need with prayers, discussion, finances, and overall support. In 1940, the Sanford Methodist Church hosted the Florida Methodist Conference. Meetings were held in the auditorium of Seminole High School on French Avenue, and members of other local churches opened their homes to the delegates. Bishop Moore delivered an outstanding sermon at the Methodist Church to an overflowing congregation. The first major expansion to the facilities occurred under the ministry of Reverend J.E. McKinley, who served from 1946 to 1954. The Vivian A. Spear property, adjacent to the sanctuary on the north, facing Park Avenue, was purchased for $7,500. From October 1, 1944 until the summer of 1948, the building was used for classrooms, at which time it was sold for $1,750 and moved elsewhere by the new owner. At the church conference on August 15, 1948, it was recommended that the church authorize the building committee to proceed with the construction of the new building to house classrooms, offices, and an assembly room. The plan was explained by Reverend McKinley, who stated that it had been approved by the quarterly conference and was to be pay as you go. The building, with interior unfinished, was estimated to cost about $30,000. On November 27, 1949, a church conference was called to discuss the borrowing of money to complete this educational building. After much lengthy discussion, a motion was approved to authorize the Finance Committee to borrow the money needed to complete the building. The mortgage was paid off shortly after completion. The new building was named McKinley Hall in 1952, and the beauty and soundness of it is due in large part to the ability of J.T. Pope, church member and contractor. In 1957, the church purchased the home of Mrs. Emmy Moyer on 5th Street, directly across from the sanctuary, for $10,000. In 1968, the Moyer property was sold to the First Baptist Church, which owned the rest of the block for a parking lot. The Sanford Naval Air Station, which had originally been commissioned on November 3, 1942, as a naval aviation training facility, was decommissioned in 1945 after World War II. It was recommissioned in 1950 due to the Korean conflict and remained operational until being closed in 1968. The area now serves as the Sanford Orlando International Airport. Naval families contributed hugely to the growth of our church. Therefore, the need for expansion of facilities and the planting of a new church. The church purchased 5 acres on Honora Road, now Airport Boulevard, and French Drive in 1958 for a new church. First Methodist Church helped organize Grace Methodist Church, and the property was later deeded to Grace Methodist Church. It was in 1961 that the church felt the need to expand further. This 2-story home and property of Mrs. Lucy Moten, which adjoined the original church property on the east, was purchased for $24,000 and used for classrooms. The year 1964 was a busy year for the church as the Moten property was razed, and due to the deterioration, aging, and obsolescence of the parsonage at 618 Magnolia, a decision was made that it was to be sold and replaced. After months of planning, the construction of the new parsonage at 1818 Paloma became a joint project with the building of the new youth wing. In early 1965, Operation Youth Wing began. In addition to the new 2-story building, the budget included funds to renovate and redesign McKinley Hall to make use of the space more effectively, estimated to cost $225,000. In addition to the laying of the cornerstone on the youth wing, on February 20th, 1966, the parsonage at 1818 Paloma was dedicated, followed by a celebratory dinner at the church. The indebtedness incurred in the construction of the youth wing and the new parsonage was paid in full sooner than expected due to the deeds of 2 devoted members of the congregation, Mrs. Lavinia Brown and Mrs. Lou Fauscher, who left part of their estates to the church. Also in 1965, the Dr. Gardner property on the east side of Magnolia Avenue and the north side of Fifth Street was purchased. This property has been used as a playground and a parking lot. The Florida Methodist Conference became the Florida United Methodist Conference in 1968. Therefore, we became the first United Methodist Church of Sanford. Reverend Leo King was appointed pastor in 1973, a position he would keep until his retirement in 1983. Under the direction of his wife Ruby, the women of the church created the beautiful chrismons that still adorn our sanctuary tree each Advent. The bride's room off the Fifth Street narthex was painted, curtains installed, mirrors hung, and appropriate furniture placed in the room for the comfort of the users. Due to the growth of membership, we were appointed an associate pastor in 1977. Reverend Scott Harris, who had grown up in our church, was our first, followed 2 years later by Reverend Brett Sanford. The church had a need of a second parsonage, so 302 Satsuma Drive became the home for our associate pastors.